Welcome to Embracing the Difference Globally, the Ability event. Session 1 will begin shortly. We'd just like to take a moment to thank our partners this year: Rehabilitation Counseling Program from St. Cloud State University, St. Cloud State University Special Education Department, Hamline University, Metropolitan State University, and Normandale Community College.
Jose, it's wonderful to see you again. And we were trying to decide, are you still in New York or are you in Toronto? Uh-oh, so we can't hear you. What happened there, Nick? 1 second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Right. So I was just saying that it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. And I am now back in Toronto.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we're happy that the border opened up between Canada and the United States, right? Great. I am going to hand over the microphone now to our student moderator, Shane,
Great.
who will take it from here, okay?
Yes, Catherine, just a quick technical question. Vladimir is trying to connect, but he can't.
Okay.
So, and he's asking me if I have the password for the
Okay,
meeting. I wasn't asked for a password, but
okay. I'll get on my computer and we will send that to Vladimir. Okay?
sure.
Okay, here comes Shane.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ability event. This event was created by the Rehabilitation Studies programs at St. Cloud State University in collaboration with Hamline University, Metro State University, and Normandale Community College. My name is Shane Hawley. I'll be your host this morning. I'm a graduate student in the Rehabilitation and Addictions Counseling program at St. Cloud State University. I'm a white man who uses he, him pronouns. I'm 5'8", a little overweight. I'm bald with a big black beard and dark rimmed square glasses. I look a lot like Gimli from Lord of the Rings in a dress shirt and a flower print mask. So that kind of paints the picture for you. Our interpreters today are Amy Kalmus and Don Raymond. And could each of you please audio describe yourselves?
I'm Amy Kalmus. I am a white female wearing a black shirt and a blue background, medium length hair.
Hello, I'm Dawn Raymond. I'm the other ASL interpreter. I am a pleasantly plump white woman with strawberry blonde hair and a brown shirt and a mottled pastel background.
All right, thank you very much. Before we get started, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. If you need CRC CEUs after you pay the session fee and attend the webinar, you'll be sent a short quiz. Once the entire series is complete, we will issue you your CEU certificate. All of the sessions will be recorded and available for you free on our YouTube page, but we will continue to allow people to gain CEU credits by watching the recordings and taking the CEU quiz. New this year, you can earn a micro badge. If you are interested in using the sessions in the series to earn a micro badge, please email ahknopf@stcloudState.edu. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. I'd like to welcome Jose Viera, the Chief Executive Officer for the World Blind Union and permanent representative of the UN Stakeholder Group of Persons with Disabilities, and Dr. Vladimir Cuk, Executive Director of the International Disability Alliance and co-chair of the Global Action on Disability. Mr. Viera, would you like to further introduce yourself and audio describe yourself, please?
Thank you once again. It is indeed an honor to be part of this exciting event. My name is Jose Viera. I am based in Toronto. I am originally from Argentina. And it's really funny because as I was listening the other audio descriptions, I was asking myself if I have to audio describe myself. I hope I'll be right. I yes, I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt with that is a soft color. If I remember right, my background is a wall that is either white or brown. And I'm a male with short hair and brown hair, if I recall correctly. And by the way, as you can tell from my poor audio description, I am blind, totally blind. And it is indeed, again, a pleasure to be part here for this event.
Thank you, Mr. Viera. And Dr. Cuk, would you please further introduce yourself and audio describe yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Vladimir Cuk, and I'm Executive Director, International Disability Alliance, and I'm originally from Belgrade, Serbia. Jose and I are a little bit confused with this like audio description. We usually are not invited or blessed to do so. I will try as well. I am a white male wheelchair user. I have a short brown, sometimes red hair when it is sunny day. I wear glasses, a small beard, Ted Baker shirt. I don't know what else to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. So I'll get right into it. For my first question, I'll address Mr. Viera first, and then allow Dr. Cuk to follow up. Before we get started with the International Disability Alliance, can you please tell our audience what the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, CRPD, is, and what the optional protocol is, and why it's so important on a global scale?
Thank you for the question. I guess I would like to start by trying to give two answers in one. And I'll start maybe with the easiest answer, and that is that the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities is an international instrument which was adopted by the United Nations that aim at compiling all the human rights that people with disabilities are entitled. The convention, it's indeed a legally binding instrument for all those countries that have ratified the convention. And I think the most interesting piece of the description of the CRPD convention is that when we look at the convention, we can clearly see different blocks. And I think those different blocks within the text of the convention very much speaks to the needs of people with disabilities when it comes to promote social inclusion. And that's how we first can see in the text of the convention articles related to understand basic definitions and to agree on basic definitions that can enable the further implementation of the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities. The next block of the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities is a set of articles that try to set up the scene. So basically, through agreeing on the guiding principles of the Convention to some of the main general obligations that countries who have ratified the treaty are now obliged to undertake, speaks to basically what is the fundamental basis in which we can build on the disability rights and therefore the further implementation of the convention. The next block is, I believe, the most interesting one, and it's basically a combination of general rights for persons with disabilities, but at the same time very specific rights that the CRPD contains in order to ensure that when we promote in social inclusion, we do it from a holistic point of view. And an example of what I'm trying to say here is that, for instance, we have articles related to accessibility, which is clearly a right, or I would say a precondition for inclusion. But on the other hand, we have very specific rights, like, for instance, the one in Article 2024, which is right to education, the 27, which is right to employment, which basically gives us the idea of this need for a balanced approach, trying to cover all those aspects that are general and that will create the right space for people with disabilities to be included, but at the same time, the specific rights that governments should fulfill, protect, and promote when it comes to persons with disabilities. A remaining block of the text of the CRPD, it's more about the implementation and monitoring mechanisms of the CRPD. Then you have, in this last block, you have a set of articles that speaks about what countries should do or are encouraged to do. And for instance, one example of that is the article related to the international cooperation. And at the same time, the last piece of the CRPD in this last block is related to the functioning of the Crpd Committee, which is this body of independent experts that help the monitoring process that each country that is part of the CRPD is mandatory for them to complete. So if we want to look at from a holistic point of view, I think the CRPD Convention represents not only the first 21st century international instrument and one of the fastest ratified international instruments among all the UN treaty bodies and international conventions, but at the same time is the result, and I'm here trying to connect with the second answer that I said I was going to give. I think the convention is the result of a process. Of course, for those who may be more familiarized with the international human rights law, we know that any convention is a result of a process, but I think the unique element that the CRPD convention had, if we want to compare with other human rights conventions, is that the process which led to the adoption of this convention was mainly led by persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. And I think for me, that is the most important element. And I really emphasize as much as I can always the fact that the process that allowed us to have a convention was the result of persons with disabilities, first, understanding what their needs are. Second, realizing that some other conventions had references to persons with disabilities. The closest one we can say is the Convention on the Right of the Child. But at the same time, realizing that we needed a specific convention to address the issue of more than 1 billion people around the world. So I think the convention, the text of the convention is indeed important and is the text that all countries should follow in promoting the rights of persons with disabilities. But what we cannot leave out, and we should at least try our best to always keep in mind that the process was led by persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. And the fact that it was led by persons with disabilities and their representative organizations speaks a lot about the organization of the disability rights movement. You know that many social movements can take different forms and can have different shapes and advocacy strategies, but the disability rights movement, structured through organizations that always represent the interest of the disability community, got together long time ago and started to advocate for a convention. Just in closing to my first answer, I would say that the additional protocol is a document that is part of the convention that basically speaks more to the individual size of the rights of persons with disabilities. Because as you have heard me few times already, when I was presenting the convention, I mainly referred to the states and what are the obligations coming from the states. But the additional protocol also had the intention And again, it was the result of this advocacy strategy put in place by persons with disabilities to give sufficient space and recognition for those individuals who are persons with disabilities and feel that their states are not fulfilling their rights, and therefore having the chance to raise their voice within the context of the convention. I'll pause here and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chuk. I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Viera, my apologies. Now, Dr. Chuk, can you tell us about the International Disability Alliance and its mission?
Yes, thank you very much. So basically, IDA is a global organization of persons with disabilities. So we are a representative organization of persons with disabilities. You have heard for many organizations that are working for persons with disabilities, many charity organizations, etc. But we are democratic political organization that represents persons with disabilities. We have 14 large networks, one of which is the World Blind Union that Jose is now CEO. And through these 14 large networks, some of them regional, some of them global organizations, we have more than 1,100 national organizations from 182 countries of the world. So pretty much we have representation in every single country of the world. What is also important is to recognize that some of these organizations are very old organizations and some of the first civil society organizations, if you like. Because of the wars and the results of the wars, countries were trying to facilitate response to the returning veterans. And you know this, probably you studied in the disability studies and you read in the books. But just to repeat, I think it's important to recognize that some of the first civil society organizations in the world are actually organizations of persons with disabilities. So what we do, we have secretariats in Geneva and New York primarily, but also we have people that are working across the world in more than 10 countries of the world, so that we will be closer to the ground, that we will be closer to different global south regions, etc., etc. Primarily, we work in what we call intergovernmental processes, which means that in Geneva and New York, we work with UN member states, which are countries that are members to the United Nations system, to influence, advocate, and promote mainstreaming of the rights of persons with disabilities across UN system. This we do very smoothly and we simply work with the countries that we call friendly countries. We have 80 countries in New York and similar number in Geneva that we suggest some recommendations for the negotiation of funding, negotiation of programs, resolutions, and then cumulatively, slowly, we influence agenda in the UN. This can be about human rights, this can be about development, it can be about peace and security, etc. So just for example, in 2019, after many years of work, advocacy, technical work, etc., we got first ever Security Council resolution on the rights of persons with disabilities. And this is so important because this is the first time that this body, Security Council, which is the highest international body that we have in the world, commit itself to include monitoring of the rights of persons with disabilities in a time of conflict, in war, in the response to war, in the peace processes, etc., etc. It's also committed itself to consult with organizations of persons with disabilities. Next, we work with the treaty body system in Geneva, which is a system of different committees that are following the work of different conventions. For this conversation, Jose already presented on CRPD. So we have CRPD Committee, which meets and reviews reports of countries on how they progress with implementation of CRPD. And in parallel, we support organizations of persons with disabilities to come to Geneva. We train them, we bring them, and we support them to engage with their governments in front of CRPD committee in what is called interactive dialogue, and thus hold governments accountable on what they said that they are doing or not doing. So basically, government can say, we bought 500 buses since the last review, and they are accessible for blind, for wheelchair users, etc. And then, for example, organizations or persons with disabilities say, yeah, that is true, that's great, but you did not make bus stops accessible, so we cannot still use it. So this is like typical, I'm now making it very simplified, but along those lines. Then we do capacity building in a global south, where we implement very intense and complex training for organizations or persons with disabilities for the developing world to learn about CRPD, to learn about Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, and to help them engage with their governments, both to give them technical assistance, but also to hold them accountable. Then we work with the humanitarian actors, peace and security actors. We work with the donor community through what was mentioned earlier by a moderator, GLAD, Global Action on Disability, which is gathering of donors in disability world. I can speak much more, but of course, let's move on.
Thank you, Dr. Chuk. So this next question is for both of you. I'll direct it first at Dr. Chuk, and then Mr. Viera can follow up. Could you please share what IDA has been doing to advocate for the CRPD and the optional protocol?
I mean, we came together. That's how basically IDA started, by coming together as a set of international organizations, global organizations, to promote adoption of the CRPD. So that's how IDA started before 2000 even. And then we were meeting and negotiating, and disability communities is a mix of variety of organizations representing variety of impairments. And sometimes these impairments want different things, and sometimes opposing things even. So we had to really negotiate common language, common agreement, common messages in order to get to the convention. So this was all done prior to the adoption of the convention. And now we stick together to now deal with implementation of the convention. So what we do, I said about training, I said about direct support for the treaty bodies. We also do follow-up studies where we go to the countries that received what is called concluding observations, which country receives at the end of the process at the CRPD committees, where CRPD committee says, okay, this is what you did now until next review, until next 5 years, come back to us and report on this and this and this, how did you progress? So we look at how countries actually implement these concluding observations. I think that most important work that IDA does is by connecting organizations or persons with disabilities with the governments, with the UN system, and providing these preconditions for engagement of people with disabilities, with either national systems, national governments, or UN at all levels. Jose, would you like to chip in?
Yes, thank you, Vladimir. I think Vladimir mentioned in his previous response the difference between organizations for persons with disabilities and organizations of persons with disabilities, and I think that is a critical difference that has been guiding the work of IDA. And by that, what I'm trying to say is that a big investment that IDA does all the time is to equip those organizations of persons with disabilities, those organizations who have been working in ensuring the perspective of persons with disabilities is included, both nationally and internationally. But of course, the movement needs further investment, needs further development. The movement needs more actors becoming on board and supporting the movement. And I think IDA has this double role of actually providing that support, equipping OPDs, but actually advocating with other actors, and those can be UN agencies, other governments, donors, multilateral entities, etc., so they can do even more in the line of this idea of promoting the right of person with disabilities. So that double role that IDA has in building up the movement and bringing more resources and players to the movement is actually what I believe makes IDA a unique combination of efforts from bottom to top when it comes to the implementation of the convention.
Thank you both. So this next question is pretty sweeping and open-ended, but what changes have you seen over the last 20 years and what hopes do you have for the next 20 years?
Shall I begin, or Jose, do you wanna?
Whoever would prefer to start.
Let me just briefly, quickly. So basically, before COVID, we saw so many developments, and I believe Jose will agree with me to say that we really see the new wave of commitments and really successes that were made by disability rights movement. First of all, following the adoption of CRPD, we saw that for the first time recognition of persons with disabilities in Agenda 2030, and this was really a historical moment because never before people with disabilities were recognized in any development documents, and that has really serious consequences for the rights of persons with disabilities, especially in the global South. So this was really instrumental change, and this was done by collective advocacy of all organizations of persons with disabilities and their partners, and we received so many recognition as the most organized movement globally, better than a gender, better than youth, children rights, etc., etc. And it was in that moment really correct, and I believe to this date as well, at the global level, at least. Then after that, it really started with a set of other developments, such as we implemented the first Global Disability Summit in 2018, which brought 1,000 participants from heads of states to like heads of agencies, private sector, etc., which all committed to the large set of wonderful commitments that they should implement over time. Then we had we had adoption of the guidelines on inclusion of the rights of persons with disabilities in a humanitarian action. So this was very important because for a first time in the humanitarian field, persons with disabilities were recognized and prescribed how to include persons with disabilities in this work. Finally, as I mentioned, Security Council resolution, and generally more and more commitments from many stakeholders and players towards disability. Unfortunately, this was very much stopped with the beginning of COVID, when we were very quickly reminded that the discrimination is still alive and kicking, and where really lives of persons with disabilities were delegated as of the lower value, and when those lives were not saved or choose not to save them and prioritize lives of people without disability. So we were reminded quickly that we cannot be praising ourselves too much and that the job is not done and that we have to do much more. Jose, please, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thank you, Vladimir. I guess, you know, looking back, and I think you have all heard us several times today saying the unique added value of IDA as a collective effort, as a union of different organizations that came together a long time ago and realized that something had to change if we want to really meaningful participate in society. And I think almost after 25 years, great achievements have been obtained at the international level, some of which Vladimir already presented. What I think also the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us is that we now need to orient more efforts to make sure that all what we have achieved actually start becoming a lasting change for persons with disabilities. And that is a nice challenge, and it's even more complicated, but at the same time, even more exciting when we have to do this by an organization like IDA that is a democratic and political organization. When we look at the disability rights movement, if there is, I'm sure there are many characteristics of the movement, but one of them, and I would say one of the most important one, is that the disability rights movement is a combination of different organizations with different interests and representing different communities that have realized the importance of common and basic agreements. And I think that is something that we should celebrate and use in the future to actually transform or to continue transforming the life of people living around the world, people with disabilities.
Thank you again. Recently, there's been a big campaign around We the 15, an organization that started, I think, around 10 years ago, showcasing the atrocities and like violence against people with disabilities, but has since kind of evolved into an organization showcasing just kind of the everyday lives and existence of people with disabilities. I know very recently they've used the Paralympics as kind of a launching point again to draw attention to their organization. Could you please share what we might learn from We the 15 and how university students may get involved with this as disability advocates? And we can
Thank
start
you,
with Mr. Viera if you like, or Dr. Cuk, whoever prefers.
Jose, do you want to go first?
You can go first, Vladimir. You have been leading.
Yeah, so basically, We the 15 started actually a couple of weeks ago. So it's not old. It's a brand new coalition, brand new network that is network of 20 large organizations: IDA, International Paralympic Committee, World Bank, UN Human Rights, UNICEF, many other organizations, Special Olympics, to just mention a few. And these are all basically organizations committed to this mission. And the mission is really to bring disability front and center. You will agree that disability was never a sexy topic. It was never present in the media. And when it was portrayed in a very negative format, usually, either as portraying people with disabilities as sufferers or receiving a charity, or maybe as somebody who will inspire non-disabled people to do magical things, etc., etc. So never a really correct representation of people with disabilities themselves. So we came together, and this whole network is managed between IDA, International Disability Alliance, and the International Paralympic Committee. So those are two leading organizations. And we set ourselves to change the world, just simply as that. And we give ourselves 10 years to change the narrative about disability and to change some of the key issues that are important for people with disabilities today. So, for example, the first concrete objective of this campaign, besides raising awareness, and you maybe noticed that many buildings were colored in a purple on a day that campaign started. Then there was very interesting video that indeed portrayed people with disabilities not basically as they are, not belonging to any of the extreme stereotypical portrayal. But concrete objectives, first one will be to promote prioritization of vaccination against COVID in the world for people with disabilities, because people with disabilities are those that are far likely to die from COVID or to contract COVID, etc., etc. So this is a concretely first task. Next one will be to deal with access to technology, assistive technology. So this is the next step, and we will probably use Paralympic Games in China next year, Winter Paralympic Games in 2022, to bring this next topic. And then we'll see about what will be next and what will be next. So we will be choosing carefully these objectives, and IDA will be leading in a decision-making on what really is important for people with disabilities. Now, what you can do, you can magnify messages. You probably are living on a social media, and right now probably not listening to this presentation, but rather scrolling through like Facebooks and whatever, Twitters. So you can broadcast these messages. So if you see something, if you agree with this, share with your friends and your networks and do whatever you can do. And also, if you want to do more, let us know. There is a website with the 15. Let us know what you want to do. Let us know if you want to volunteer in our work, etc., or anything else that you can really contribute.
I can only add a very small comment, and that is, I think with the 15 campaign is showing us that and let me use a very common COVID-19 term nowadays, and the bubble. I think with the 15 campaign is showing us how big we can get our bubble, and I think we are just using a little piece of that big bubble, and the way that we can, even further dominate that bubble is through expanding the work in different areas. And I think we need people like you all to actually connect us with other areas of knowledge, sectors of the industry, knowledge generation. So we really want to see in the next 5 or 10 years that we talk about disability, but not just in spaces like this, but also in areas that we may have not yet been able to enter. So that's, I think, the invitation for you all. Take us and help us to get even more recognition and expand the work that we are doing.
Thank you again. Can either or both of you share some examples of how youth are involved in the work of IDA or being change agents in their countries?
Jose, go ahead now first.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Vladimir. Yes, I really want to, we can dedicate another whole webinar to talk about youth, but in a very short summary, the International Disability Alliance has always promoted the engagement of young people, not only because it's easy to say and to realize that young people are the future of our work, but actually because within the disability movement, many of the organizations of persons with disabilities, or a lot of them, are either led by young people with disabilities or have understood the need of incorporating the youth perspective in their work. So basically, hearing what our members and those 1,100 organizations that we represent have been telling us, the International Disability Alliance, with support from different UN agencies, has a youth network, and that network is amazing how quick and how fast and how innovative they are, and how they are already thinking not only about disability and issues that we may be more familiarized with, like education or employment, but they are already thinking on how to connect disability and technology, disability and social media, disability and artificial intelligence. So the fact that IDA has created that space for youth, for the youth to get together, is just a small contribution that is facilitating this type of discussions. And I think that is something that we need to continue doing, and I'm sure at least would be one of the driver for change in the long term. And just a little extra comment here. Vladimir mentioned a few minutes ago the Global Disability Summit. And the Global Disability Summit is an event that tries to motivate stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean governments, multilateral agencies, UN entities, etc., to come forward and make commitments and say, I commit to invest this and this in the field of disability. I commit to promote disability in my programs. So the Global Disability Summit 2022, which will take place virtually in February next year, would have for the first time a youth disability summit. And we are doing this because we recognize that we need to give enough space for the youth and in general, but in particular youth with disabilities, to start building the future from the beginning. So those who have a particular interest in youth movement in general and youth with disabilities, you can visit the IDA website and you will find more information about the youth network.
Dr. Chuk, do you have anything to add?
Nothing from my side. I think that's great.
Excellent. So actually, just to kind of build on what you were just speaking about, Mr. Viera, does IDA provide opportunities for internships for university students or entry-level positions and for recent graduates, things like that?
We do.
Yes. Go ahead, Vladimir.
We do. They definitely do, and we are always hungry for the talent. We are a fast-growing organization. We had increase in our budget over the last 4 years of 600%. So it's really like we are hiring all the time. Actually, we have a problem with the finding good talent. So yes, in so many ways, yes, but people that are willing to work, that are knowledgeable, that are committed, motivated, and that are ready to work with us to change the world.
Thank you. What would the best way for a young person who's looking to get involved with IDA be? Would it be contacting someone? Would it be going to something like the Global Disability Summit if that was an opportunity for them? Are there other ways that you might suggest?
The best will be to join the CRPD listserv. So listserv that is sharing information about opportunities. So that will be zero level. To follow Facebook, Twitter of IDA, so that because we are constantly posting opportunities there for engagement, for employment, for volunteering, for everything that is happening around disability, and not just from IDA, but also from partner organizations and the friendly organizations. So I think that would be for me starting point. Register everywhere, start getting information. It doesn't cost anything. You can just start following things, and then after that, of course, if there are any webinars, conferences that you will learn from these platforms, you can then attend those, etc., etc. If you see any concrete opportunity for employment, you can apply. You can flag Jose and my attention that we were together at this event, and we can see how then recruitment process will go forward.
Thank you for that. So we have a question that's been provided. How has the global view of persons with disability changed? And is any area more progressive than others?
Well, if you ask me in the winter of 2019, I will be all positive about this response, and I will be praising everything and how we made leaps of progress in how world portrays persons with disabilities. And it did change. We moved from medical model and medical understanding of disability, whereas that the disabled body is the one that is dysfunctional, that needs to be adopted, rehabilitated, and fixed before it can move, before it can join society. And then we move to more progressive models, social model, human rights models, and really understanding disability as more intersection and interaction between impairments and the society, whereas in society lies the responsibility to provide accessibility, reasonable accommodations, and everything else for people with disabilities to participate. So indeed, we moved, but are we moving fast enough? Are we moving comprehensively and everywhere? No, and far from where we should be. And really, I will say it again, but COVID rude awakening in how much more we have to do, because doctors were left with what I call naked discrimination. Nobody was there. Nobody was observing. They had no guidance or very little guidance on what to do in these cases. And they were just making decisions who will live, who will die based on purely their personal discrimination and their training. And when I say training, I don't think official professional training, but training through the whole life, you know, and they were making such a decision. So a lot needs to be done. I think that where we are lacking the most is inclusion in private sector employment. That is the last frontier of discrimination. Still, disabled bodies are not seen as those that can be productive. Very much we see discrimination there, and very little progress, actually. Yes, there are wonderful examples coming from, like, you know, these like technology companies, and but generally speaking, at the global level, and if you look at the big numbers, people with disabilities are not employed, and there is no concrete plan to do so, and there is no concrete advancement that we can say, let's stick to this plan so that we can do something. Yeah, there are some improvements in like education, etc., but much more needs to be done. Jose, would you agree? Or
I do agree, and I would like to compliment what Vladimir you just said by bringing the notion of something that the CRPD speaks a lot about, and that we as a disability movement have been working on, and that is access to. I think the pandemic has shown us the little level of access that people with disabilities have to different things, from online shopping when we were in lockdown, to even more basic things like accessing healthcare systems. And I guess the biggest challenge we have ahead of us is, of course, how we make systems accessible. But what measures needs to be put in place to guarantee access by persons with disabilities to the different elements of our life? And that means from accessing to education, accessing to employment, accessing to social protection systems, and why not, you know, looking at the life of a person with disability from a broader perspective. I think Vladimir was mentioning some good, small but good examples on efforts related to inclusive education, some even smaller examples about efforts made in promoting employment for persons with disabilities. But we are still waiting for that big change to happen in a way that, you know, persons with disabilities, we have the right, and then we should be accessing to recreation activities, to cultural life. And of course, if you don't have a job, if you don't have a health system, how can you dream of accessing to cultural life? But actually, the fact that we are denial of accessing to cultural life is actually what creates even more discrimination and isolation for persons with disabilities. And I think the pandemic has shown us right on our faces how much needs to be done in securing that access is a fundamental first step towards inclusion.
Thank you again. So out of curiosity, what kind of pressure is IDA putting on the US to ratify the CRPD? Is there anything that all of us can do to support that?
That's a good question. How much time we have left? We are doing something, but it's very sporadic. We have this idea of maybe trying to do state-by-state ratification instead of going for a national Republican Party versus Democratic Party ratification. I I will remind students and all of us that US did not ratify Convention on the Rights of the Child, because it fundamentally disagree with the right of every child to have on schooling, education. So US as a country disagree that every child should have a right on like education. That was one of the barriers for like US to ratify CRC. This is you know, it's in, don't want to say impossible mission, but something fundamentally needs to change in the US for US to start ratifying convention. They did not ratify rights of the women. Probably that will not be possible. Disability can slide if it is mixed between, you know, blue states understanding of rights, but minus civil rights. So broadening of the civil rights, let's say, which is, again, I don't believe possible right now or in next 20 years, and maybe charity approach of the red states. It's maybe possible, but I really objectively don't see ratification of CRPD. It maybe stands a bigger chances than rights of the women. I agree with that statement, but how and what we can do and what we can all collectively, I don't know, grow up, finish schools and change your country. Go do work in like politics and try to bring a better America.
Mr. Viera, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. We just have a couple of quick minutes left. I personally have a question. I'm wondering, how do you remain hopeful in the face of this uphill battle, or do you remain hopeful?
In the face of
this uphill battle, just the struggle. It seems like there's a lot working against people with disabilities currently worldwide.
Of course, we have to be hopeful. I mean, we all are, you know, we are all hopeful. Are you hopeful with the COVID? You are wearing mask and you're choosing a particular mask, so you are hopeful about your like future, etc. So we are all hopeful, you know, equally. So we have a little bit more responsibility, Jose and I, but at the end of the day, we all share the same hope for a better future. We will not be speaking here with you if we are not hopeful. And we find satisfaction in the gains that we make. We achieve objectives as a movement. Like I said previously, we are one of the most, if not the best organized global movement right now. So there is a lot of satisfaction that comes from it. You know, there is a lot of satisfaction when you see that a law in Tunisia changed based on the like, advocacy and the training that you did and that your colleagues did in that country. It's a wonderful fulfillment. It's a wonderful fulfillment when you hear that World Bank Indonesia returned the project to World Bank headquarters because they wanted more focus on disability, etc., because of advocacy of like Indonesian organizations or persons with disabilities towards local World Bank. A lot of things we see that gives us hope and that gives us simply power and strength to do more. Jose, I don't know if I spoke on behalf of both of us.
No, I would only, I mean, I fully agree with what Vladimir just said. I think, you know, we live in a world where apparently the only thing that matters is the results. So if you achieve 10, you are good. If you achieve 9, you are not good. And I think what we try to do is, of course, we have a expected result to achieve. Of course, we want people with disabilities, all people with disabilities to have a job. But what drives us in our work is where we started from and the journey that we are doing together. And I think what keep us hopeful in achieving our overarching goal is to see that we advance every day. Today, we are maybe 1 millimeter farther than we were yesterday. And that is for us a big celebration. It's difficult maybe to apply this vision in other movements that need quicker responses, that are living a faster life. But when we look at persons with disabilities, I think we need to realize where we are coming from, independently of the short-term result. We are going to see the changes in 100 years from now, but we will see it.
And just to go back for a second, just to say one more thing to the previous question that I should maybe said, and it's important to know this. America, USA was a leader of the disability movement globally back in 70s and 80s with the Judy Heumann, etc. It was leading everything globally, and everybody were looking at America for inspiration, etc. Unfortunately, that is not the case anymore. And you, as a new generation, you need to do something. You need to recognize this. You can be better. This country can be much better, and it deserves to be better. But it's like a little bit slacking over the time, simply we need the new generation of forward-looking people that will not be satisfied only with the civil rights, and will look beyond that, and we look comprehensively at the human rights and what we all as a human deserve. And I think that is, if I can have parting words, I would say that help to see through such a vision. This country deserves more, and it was a leading, and it's not anymore, because fundamentally it cannot lead. That is a problem.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to thank Shane, and here I'm going to sneak in so I can see you too. Vladimir, good to see you again.
Oh, hello.
Jose, good to see your smile again too. So thank you, you two. And Vladimir, I could not imagine a better end comment, because that's really why Dr. Knopf and I wanted to develop this series, to really get more of our youth involved, get more graduate students or students involved in understanding the role of the CRPD and the lack of leadership that exists with the CRPD implementation on a global scale. And we're missing out. And hopefully, like you said, some of these people maybe will go into politics, maybe be the change that we hope to see, but whatever their career path leads them, equipping them with the knowledge and understanding is the first step. So we're very grateful and thankful for both of you for taking the time, because as you shared about the work of IDA, you guys are busy, very, very busy.
Little bit.
A little bit busy. So thank you to both of you. And we really look forward to continuing to partner with both of you and your organization. And we're grateful for our interpreters, Don and Amy. Thank you so much. For our online participants, thank you for joining in, sharing questions and feedback. And then thank you to everyone who is on site at St. Cloud State. We're very honored to have had the opportunity to host both of you today. So I think that takes us to the end of our time, right? Okay, Amy, anything else?
Yeah,
Shane?
just,
Shane's gonna
one last quick thing to wrap up. Again, thank you everyone for attending. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you'd like to earn your CRC CEUs for today's session, you may sign up for a CEU on our website. Please join us for our next webinar on Wednesday, September 22nd. It's Andres J. Gallegos. And it's an overview of the National Council on Disabilities, current NCD initiatives with the CRPD, and working with US Congress to ratify the CRPD. So very much in line with what we were just speaking about. And thank you again, everyone, for attending. Again, thank you, Mr. Viera and Dr. Cuk. And we hope to see you all again in a couple of weeks.
Bye, thank you guys.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Embracing the Difference Globally, the Ability event.